at Grand Valley State University. I'm interviewing Dr. Robert Browne at his office in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today is June 17th, 2015. Well, thanks for speaking with me today, Dr. Browne. Let's start out with a little bit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about when and where you were born, and a little bit about your family.
Well, I was born in Coldwater, Michigan, November 12th, 1924. And my parents were divorced when I was 2 years old, so I went to live with my paternal grandparents. I had a sister that was 1 year older than I. And so we lived with my grandparents in Coldwater, in the city of Coldwater, from the age of 2 up until the age of, probably 6 or 7.
Okay.
And then we moved out, these were Depression years, of course. Then we moved out to a farm. We moved on a farm. So we lived on a farm with my grandparents. And my father remarried, and he moved out on the farm also with my grandparents. So my sister and I were on the farm. She passed away at the age of 11 from a congenital kidney problem. And I continued to live on the farm until I was probably in the sixth grade, I guess. And then I went to live with my mother, who was living in Lansing, Michigan. And I lived in Lansing, Michigan with my mother and stepfather for 3 or 4 years. And I don't recall the dates, but it was in the 35, 36, 37, and through there. Then I went back to live in Coldwater with my father through high school. And once I graduated from high school, I left Coldwater, enrolled at the University of Michigan, and then, of course, enlisted in the Air Corps, and went through pilot training and became a pilot in the South Pacific. Came back after the war, re-enrolled in Michigan in '46, and completed my pre-dental education, and then enrolled in dental school. Finished dental school in 1952. Finished dental school, and then went to Kalamazoo, Michigan, to practice general dentistry. After 5 years of practicing general dentistry in Kalamazoo, I decided I wanted to be an orthodontist. So I went back to Michigan for an additional 2 years of orthodontic training, and ended up coming to Grand Rapids, where I practiced orthodontics for 20 years.
Okay.
Then I got involved in the business world, and one thing led to another. And
That's your second career?
Yes, that's
or well, third, I don't know.
Maybe a third or fourth. And
so you're in finance or investments or something?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I got into business just as a hobby, and it grew considerably, ending up with 7,000 employees. And I sold that company and took the proceeds from that company and set up this office, which is an investment office. And we just make our own investments, and our own investments are limited to the New York Stock Exchange. So
okay. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning now here. So was your grandfather a farmer?
Well,
did he work the farm?
Yes and no. He, of course, as a boy was a farmer. Then he worked as a grocery clerk at a grocery store in downtown Coldwater. And my father, who had moved in with him during the Depression, he worked the farm. And my grandfather continued to work as a grocery clerk at the city market.
Okay. Okay. So did you get in? Were you involved in the working of the farm as well?
Oh yes.
You had chores?
You bet.
What'd you do?
You bet. What did I do?
Yeah.
Well, everything that you could when you were 10, 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And many things you weren't really probably capable of doing very well, but I don't think the 10-year-olds today could do them. But I did shock grain. I milked cows by hand and cleaned out the stables and gathered the eggs and did everything that everything and more that I had the strength to do.
Wow. Wow. So was it a relief for you to get out of that situation when you went to live with your mom in Lansing? That you didn't have to do that kind of farm work anymore, or not really?
Well, no, doing that kind of work didn't bother me.
Okay.
Work has never bothered me much. I haven't. I don't shy away from work. It doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't turn me off.
Okay. So you were a student at the University of Michigan when you were drafted, or you enlisted, or what happened?
No, I was not. I never registered for the draft. The Aviation Cadet Examining Board came to Ann Arbor in November or December of '42, and I had just turned 18, and so I had not registered for the draft or anything, and I went down and signed up for the Aviation Cadet Program when the examining board came. Now you had to meet certain physical requirements, which were pretty stringent for aircrew personnel.
Like, what were those requirements?
Well, particularly vision. Vision was a real requirement. The other one was whether your joints would tolerate high levels. They used to call it the bends. You would get pains in your joints if you went to high altitudes. So they put you in a pressure chamber, and they would take you up to 20,000 feet, 25,000 feet, and many of them would get pains in their joints. They washed them out. They couldn't continue. So that was part of the testing that they would do.
Okay.
And if you were, particularly if you're going to be, there was a pilot, bombardier, and navigator went through the training programs, and I had never been in an airplane prior to that time, but I knew that they paid 50% more for flying pay than they did for the ground troops, so that appealed to me. So I said, I'll try that.
Okay. It wasn't that you'd always wanted to be a pilot from a young age?
No.
No, okay.
No.
Okay, so you were accepted, you passed the criteria, and then where did they send you?
Well, and trying to think, well, first of all, they went on Jefferson Street in Detroit. We boarded a train, a whole bunch of us boarded a train, and they sent us to, we had to sit up in cattle cars almost, to Miami Beach, and there we exchanged our civilian clothing for Army khakis, and we learned to drill, and they used to, I recall that they would teach us a close order drill, and they would select certain cadets to lead the drills, and I was fortunate, and if you were selected as one of the drill leaders or the commanders, so-called, then you had some privileges that rank has its privileges, and so well, I'll try out for that too, and I won. Apparently because I was louder than anyone else. When I yelled out the commands, they were louder than anyone else. So the powers that be picked me as the commander. So in the barracks, I had a private room at the end of the barracks, and so it worked out pretty well.
Nice.
Being a loudmouth worked out well. That's
Did you have any trouble with the men? Did they give you any grief, or?
No, they were all no, I didn't have any trouble with it. Yeah.
They were all about your same age.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And so, did you find basic training difficult?
Well, it was hard work. Yeah, it was strenuous, and And then they sent us from Miami. After that, they sent us to Xavier University for some pre-flight school, navigation and aircraft recognition and that sort of thing. And that all those were courses that were taught by the Jesuit priests there. And there were no students, only the Army at that university at the time. And that was a good experience. The Jesuits boned up on what to teach us, and it was a good experience. We enjoyed ourselves there, and the people in Cincinnati were very, very nice to all of us. And we used to jog through the streets in close order and sing Army songs and so forth. And 3 days a week maybe or something like that. And people would be out on their porches every time we come along, just to see us and listen to us. So it was great support from the people of Cincinnati, and I've always had a fond spot in my heart for the
That's
people
great.
of Cincinnati because of the way they accepted us.
Yeah,
and
that's
welcomed us.
great. How long did that training last, or that education last in Cincinnati?
Oh, not long. I think maybe it was a couple of months, 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
And it was just navigational school and aircraft recognition. You could, going to be a pilot, you should be able to recognize enemy ships, the type of ship and the number at a quick glance, and they would flash it on the screen, and you were supposed to tell them quickly how many there were and what type of ship it was, and so forth. And then they taught you some Morse code, dots and dashes.
Was that tough to learn?
Oh, terrible.
I think so, yeah.
But you know, being 18, 19 years old, you can learn things quicker, and we did learn it. We did learn it, and we could. You had to be able to send so many words a minute. You had to be able to accept so many words a minute, and we all did. We all accomplished that end.
Good.
Well, it was. Not everybody could get into aviation cadets, and you had to go through a lot of testing in order to get to that point. And but it was doable.
Yeah.
It was doable.
Okay, so after Cincinnati, what happened next?
Well, Cincinnati. I think we went from Cincinnati to San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center, and as I recall, it was pretty much more of the same in San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center, although we may have had some more education on aircraft engines and so forth, because there are several fields around San Antonio. Well, it was at the time, several aircraft fields around there, Army aircraft fields around there, and so we may have gotten some engine mechanics there. And when we left San Antonio, then we started our flying training.
Okay.
And we went. I think the first place we went was Cimarron Field, and I think that was in Kansas. This has been 75 years ago.
I know it.
My memory isn't.
I don't blame you. You're doing good.
It isn't what it used to be. But I think we went to Cimarron Field, which was a basic, primary flying school.
Okay.
And that's where we got our first ride in an airplane. And the airplanes were PT-17s, they call them, primary trainer 17, an open cockpit airplane. And you had to wear a parachute, of course, in every one of them, because they were open cockpit, and you'd fly upside down, so you're hanging there by your seat belt. So you wanted to be sure you had a good
seat belt.
Parachute, but you never knew where that was or not.
Oh my.
Anyhow, that's, as I say, that's where we got our first flight training, and the instructor would take us out, and one instructor would have about 5 students. They were civilian instructors in the primary,
Okay.
and so that's where we learned to fly, as we call it.
So your little group stayed together through this whole process?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
No,
No.
they didn't. No, they.
Be different guys?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they put them up quite a bit.
Okay.
No reason for it that I know of. Well, I shouldn't say that. Beyond a certain point, then you selected whether you wanted to fly single engine or multi-engine airplanes.
Okay.
And at that point, I guess that's maybe after your basic training, before you went into advanced training, then you made the selection if you wanted to fly multi-engine or single engine.
Okay.
And I selected multi-engine because I felt that had a greater future in the event I ever might want to get a job with the airlines or someone else, that to have a multi-engine license would be better than a single engine license. So I selected multi-engine, and so I went to an advanced flying school where we flew twin-engine airplanes,
I see.
not single-engine airplanes.
Okay. So what was the, how many times did you go up before they let you fly on your own?
Pardon?
How many times did you go up with an instructor before you flew on your own then?
Oh, I don't recall.
Quite, I mean, you felt ready for it when it was your time to do it yourself, to be the pilot?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did, but he got out of the plane and said, "Go ahead, take it around and land it." And so I took it around, but I couldn't get it on the ground. I bounced it in about 3 times. I had to go around, but I got it the second time around. I got it on the ground.
Oh, what were you thinking when you were bouncing?
I was mad. I was just mad. That's all.
Okay.
I was just mad that
Okay.
it wasn't working well.
Okay.
But then when you master something, then it seems very easy, because shortly after that we did what they call stages. Stages is where they have a spot on the runway, and you fly around and land, and you're supposed to put your wheels on that spot on the runway.
Okay.
As close as you can to that spot on the runway. Now that seems more indicative for people who are going to be flying off aircraft carriers, but nevertheless, it was in the South Pacific. Some of those airstrips were pretty short, and you better hit it right on the beginning of the airstrip, or you're going to roll off the end. So we were shooting stages, and one of the tests after we'd sold and so forth, and my eyesight was always very, very good, and they retested it twice because they thought they'd made a mistake and it was testing too good, and because when we were shooting stages, I could come in and hit that spot almost routinely, because my depth perception was so good, and it was easy for me to do, and it wasn't because of any skill, it was just because of good eyesight, and so my eyesight had been very good, and even today, I don't wear glasses for distance, or I can read all this right here without any glasses. And so
That's
forth.
amazing.
I've been very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you went through your training after, so you said you had a total of 11 months of training. Did you say that?
Yeah. With Xavier, 9 months, 3 months in primary advanced and primary basic advanced and flying training, 3 months prior to that, and pre-flight training. Yeah.
So you joined the military in December of 1942. So by November of 1943, you were ready for action?
No. No. There was a longer period of time spent someplace.
Okay.
There might have been I might have been a longer period of time at Miami Beach, before we got out of that indoctrination. That might have been a longer period of time.
Okay.
Teaching it a drill, that's very important.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
and,
Right.
And so that might have been a longer period of time, because no, I wasn't ready to. I wasn't ready to fly overseas until probably 44, mid 44, maybe early 44.
Okay.
Something like that. Early
Okay,
44,
so
yeah.
it could have been 14, 15, 16 months of training.
Oh, yes.
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 Wow. So
Yes.
by then you felt totally prepared.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So what was your first assignment then?
Well, I went to New Guinea. I sent to New Guinea with a troop carrier group, 317th Troop Carrier Group, 41st Squadron. They flew C-47s, and we were in Hollandia, I think it was the name, Hollandia is where we went, where we landed. We went on a ship.
Is it an island in the Pacific, Hollandia?
No, that's a town in New Guinea.
In New Guinea, okay.
And we weren't there very long, and we moved from there to the Philippines, up to the Philippines, and up to Luzon and Leyte, and then finally Okinawa. So that was the three places that we were: New Guinea, Leyte, Luzon, and Okinawa. 4 places.
Okay, so you are on a troop carrier though. That's a ship?
Troop carrier? No.
No. What's a troop carrier?
Troop carrier airplane.
Okay. All together in a group.
Yeah.
Okay. How many were on your airplane?
Well, there wasn't. Sometimes there wasn't anybody on it. Sometimes you just had cargo on it.
Okay. Just
And what troop carrier? Well, they called it troop carrier because we did carry troops. We dropped paratroopers on that brochure I gave you. That we dropped paratroopers on Corregidor.
Okay.
And several other places too. And we dropped supplies in the mountains, up in the mountains to the infantry and Marines that were fighting the Japs up in the mountains.
I see.
So we dropped supplies to them, ammunition and so forth, and we dropped. We flew armored vehicles and so forth to various infantry positions and so on. So we delivered a lot of goods and so forth that were used in the battles and the fighting.
Oh, okay. How many people?
We also acted as the hospital ships. We'd fly injured out back to the hospital areas. And
So
we did a lot of different things.
So what was the capacity of your plane? You said you could fly vehicles. Like how many vehicles would fit on it?
Well, you know an Army Jeep is, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, I think you could probably put 3 Jeeps on it.
Okay. Okay. That gives me an idea of the size. And what about the crew?
Well, a crew, depending where you're going, so forth, depending on, you'd have a pilot, co-pilot, radio operator, a navigator, and a crew chief. You have 5 people.
Okay. But you weren't always the same 5 people together.
No,
No. So that changed.
that changed.
Okay. So so that was your responsibility, was to deliver weapons, food, ammunition, paratroopers. Anything else?
Well, we dropped napalm on had to burn out the Japs in the mountains. We'd take barrels of napalm and kick it out
Uh-huh.
and to burn them out.
Uh-huh.
Burn them out of different places.
Uh-huh.
So that's and we got planes shot down in the process of doing that from ground fire.
Mm-hmm. How high would you be flying when you dropped the napalm?
Well, it would only be 1,500 feet or so, 1,000
Okay.
feet at the most.
Okay. And would you fly in groups and formations?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. How many?
Well, about 3 or 4. We wouldn't
Okay.
fly a lot of them.
Okay.
You got a small drop area, so you just circle and drop, but then you're getting fired on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And as Winston Churchill said, there's nothing more exhilarating than being shot at without result.
Right.
I've
Right.
experienced that.
Yeah. That sounds really scary. So the Japanese were down on the ground with some kind of ammunition or guns headed towards you.
Oh, sure.
Wow.
Sure. Well,
Now, did any
they
of you?
shot some of us down too.
I know it. So, did any of those ones that were shot down survive? I mean,
Well, one of them was my roommate, tent mate. Name was Kaywood, Don Kaywood, and we got they shot him down. He was right ahead of me, and they shot him down. I pulled away, and made radio contact with the infantry people on the ground, and they said we pulled these people out of the plane, and but go back to Clark Field and bring some ice and some blood, and maybe we can save it. So I went back to Clark Field, where I had come from initially, and we were taking stuff up there to drop to the infantry, ammunition and so forth, and some of the infantrymen that were loaded our plane initially at Clark Field wanted to fly up with us when we were going to make this drop, and I said, no, I can't take you. I've got too much of a load now. I can't, to get this plane off the ground, I can't overload it, and so you can't go. And but when I came back then to get the ice and the blood to take up to their plane that had been shot down, I said to these infantry guys, okay, I'm not overloaded now. You fellas can fly up there with me if you want to. No thanks, no thanks. They wouldn't go then.
oh.
They realized those things fall out of the sky.
Oh boy, did your friend make it?
No,
No,
he didn't.
no.
He didn't. There were two of them, and neither one of them. Well, the pilot and the co-pilot. The crew chief and the radio operator and the navigator. I didn't. weren't close friends, but the pilot and the co-pilot were. And matter of fact, the co-pilot, the fellow flying co-pilot, was actually a first pilot, but he was waiting to go home. He put in his time. He had enough points to be shipped back to the States, but you have to get, in order to get your flight pay, you had to fly at least 4 hours a month. And so he volunteered to fly co-pilot on that trip in order to get his 4 hours in for the month that he was just waiting to get a ship to go home.
Oh,
So he didn't make it.
yeah, that's too bad.
Newman, guy's name was Newman.
Noon. So, Clark Field, that's where you were stationed?
No, we were chasing south of Clark Field.
South. Okay, so tell me about where you lived. Where'd you sleep at night?
We're in the tent.
In a
There's,
tent on.
Where did I still? Here it is, right here. See that?
Oh yeah.
That's
Why'd you
where-
hold it up for the camera?
That's where we slept in that tent down below there.
Okay. Okay.
And we always slept. That's all we ever slept in overseas.
Okay.
Well,
Cots
my
and
tent.
tents.
Yeah.
Um,
With mosquito netting around you. You had to put the mosquito net around you at night.
yeah. What was your impression of that part of the world?
Well, it was primitive as far as I was concerned.
Hot, primitive, buggy.
Well, bugs. I didn't notice the bugs so much, no. But it was hot, and you get up in that airplane, in that cockpit of that airplane, and you sit on the runway, waiting to get, permission to take off because the line of planes ahead of you to take off, and you'd get. We used to get what you call jungle rot, and there would be ulcerations. You'd get in areas where you perspire, and it would be just be ulcerations because of terrible heat.
Yeah.
And they had a medicine they called gentian violet, and you'd see these violets, purple, because the gentian violet was purple, violet, and I guess violet's purple, isn't it?
Right.
Anyway, you'd see these guys with purple all
It was like a cream or something?
No, it was just it wasn't a cream. It was just a liquid that the flight surgeon kept, and
Did it work?
yeah, it worked. Well, I suppose nature had more to do with it than anything else. They were all young, so they healed quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And you were a victim of that too?
No, yes, I was. Yes. Not to the extent some were, but I had some applications of gentian violet.
How many hours per day did you usually work?
Well, you did various things. One of the undesirable things you had to do as an officer, you had to censor all of the mail that went out. All the enlisted personnel's mail had to be read before it was mailed to their home, to whoever. And that's one thing we all hated to do. We hated that terribly. And we'd see that officer of the day coming up to our tent area with all these letters that were going to go out, bringing them up there for us to read. We'd all scatter. We'd
Not
all
me.
go someplace, try to get out of there, so we didn't have to read those letters. But that was, such an invasion of privacy,
Yeah.
and we just didn't like that at all. But
They gave you a black marker, you're supposed to cross things out?
yeah, they were concerned that in the letters they might give away locations, and that they didn't. I don't know why that was so important, but that was the reason they gave us as to why they were concerned.
But of course, the fellas knew that.
Well, yeah, they know it.
I would-
sure.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you know what? The enlisted personnel, many of them were much older than we were, and I used to be embarrassed by it. I'd get up in that airplane to fly that airplane, and the crew chief would come on. He'd be old enough to be my father practically, and he was saluting me and calling me sir and so forth. And it embarrassed me. But,
Yeah.
You had to live with what you had.
So you became lieutenant and then first lieutenant?
Yes.
And so when did those promotions happen?
Oh, I think that they happen if you're in grade so long, depending on the number of months you're in grade, they upgrade you to the next highest level. As far as I know, I don't know any other reason for it.
Okay.
When in those lower grades,
Uh-huh.
and I think the same thing is true as you go up to captain or up to major. Now, when you get into the colonels, then that's a little different proposition.
Yeah.
I think that's more on merit maybe, but I think in the lower grades, but it's just on time served.
Why don't you tell me about the point system? You mentioned about you got so many points, and when you had so many points, you could go home or you could go home on leave. How did you get points?
Well, I don't remember exactly, but generally speaking, it depended upon the number of months you were overseas.
Okay.
And those people who were overseas the longest period of time build up points faster than those who were in the States. In other words, a person in the States might have been in the service for 2 years, and yet a fellow that's overseas might have been overseas for a year and a half, less time than the other fellow, but he would get out first because he'd been overseas, so he would have more points. So that, as I recall, that was, generally speaking, was the manner in which they signed points.
I see. Oh, I see. Okay. And getting back to the mail, so you received, you corresponded with your family, or who did you correspond with?
Well, my grandmother, yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And did one of the other officers then have to read your mail?
No.
No. So if you're an officer, you didn't get your mail censored?
No.
Oh, okay. Because they figured you knew what was kosher and what wasn't?
Well, I was 18, 19 years old.
Right. Okay. Did you get any R&R when you were over in the Pacific?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, it didn't amount to much, but there was in the Philippines. Well, two things. When we were in the lower Philippines, they used to send the pilots to Sydney, Australia, and again, depending on how long you had been overseas, to qualify for R&R in Sydney, and I had not been over there long enough to qualify to go to Sydney, and then we moved farther north in the Philippines, and they sort of cut that out, and they had a place the northern part of the Philippines, which was had been an old resort, an old Philippine resort, and there was sort of a swimming pond up there, and a cottage, and they had a houseboy that cooked for you and so forth, and so we all used that. We all did, but those of us who had not qualified to go to Sydney did qualify to go up there. Then when our time came up, and so we would go up there and
Is that fun?
play cards. No,
Yeah.
we don't. We didn't have to. We didn't have to fly. We didn't have to
Just-
read mail. We didn't have to do anything. We just
Yeah.
we could just play gin or whatever we wanted to do. But
Right.
they would send 4 or 5 of us at a time, so we could play poker.
Yeah.
Something.
It's a break from the action
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah. So you didn't see much. You didn't interact with any native peoples or except like the houseboy, I guess.
Yes, we did. When we were in south of Clark Field, we went up to one of my buddies and I went up to Manila, and Santo Tomas was a school, university in Manila that had been taken over by the Japs and was sort of like a prison camp virtually, and it had been liberated by the American troops, and so we went to Santo Tomas and met a couple of young ladies who had relatives who lived in Manila, and so they took us to their relative's house
Uh-huh.
and to a dinner one night, and so we had an opportunity to meet those relatives and talk with them, and it was a nice meeting. It was a nice dinner, and nice meeting, and an opportunity to meet someone who had been there all during the time it had been occupied by the Japs.
Uh-huh.
And, so that was a good meeting.
Uh-huh. You remember the food, what they served?
No. Well, I don't have a problem with food. I can eat almost anything.
Okay, so
except
you're-
tomatoes. I don't like tomatoes.
Okay, so you're a pretty adventurous eater.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, well, that was fun. Tell me about the danger you felt. Like every time you were up in the plane, did you feel like you were in danger?
No, I've got myself in some circumstances, weather circumstances, where I knew very well I was in danger, and was convinced I was going to have to ditch in the ocean, or I was going to have to try to mush into the forest and hold the plane at an angle at the slowest speed I could, and so that when I hit the trees, I would hit them softly and not crash into them, which was foolish thinking, and then it wouldn't happen.
Oh.
You're going too fast, and
Uh-huh.
because this plane stalls out about 100 miles an hour, so
Oh.
well, you're not gonna hit anything softly.
Right.
But that was what I was thinking was going to happen, but I figured I'd get out of it.
Uh-huh.
But I could not have, of course. But yeah,
These were storms at sea, or what kind of weather are you talking about?
well, you didn't have radio facilities there, and this happened when this particular instance I'm mentioning happened. I guess when the war ended, and I'm flying from Okinawa up to Korea, Seoul, Korea, and as I said, no radio facilities, and we had just ended the war, so there wasn't anything up there. So I had a load of radio equipment that I'm going to take up to the Seoul, Korea airport, so we could start using that airstrip up there. Well, I got in. I'm over land, and I get into the soup, and but there's 6,000 feet mountains there. So I'm down around 3,000 feet. So I got to get up. I got to get out of there. So I pull up, and again thinking that I'm gonna hit this. I'm gonna hit this mountain, but I'll mush into it. Well, I wouldn't. But I got it up to 6,000, 7,000 feet or whatever. But I'm still in the clouds, going on instruments, and so I thought, well, I'll take a heading west and get out over the water, and then I'll drop down and get underneath the clouds. So I asked the navigator to give me a heading west, and from where we last known position, and a time that I could drop down. Then I knew we would be over water, which he did. So I dropped down over water, and I'm over water, and I turned back to the east till I hit the coast. I hit the coast of Korea, and I start following the coastline up, the western coastline, because there's a river that goes in to Seoul, and then the airport's right close to the river there. So I follow the coastline up to the river, turn up the river, and but I'm low, and so I can't see very far. I can't see any distance at all. So I thought, well, here I am on this river, but I won't be able to see the airport because there's no radio facility there. But as I go down the river, I can hear this B-25 transmission. And so I call him, and he can't hear me, but I can hear him. So I kept flying. As I got closer to him, then he could hear me. And I asked him where he was, and he said he's over the airport giving landing instructions. And the airplane has what they call a radio compass, the old airplanes. And I talk about have to talk about the old warbirds. But anyway, you turn that radio compass on, it'll point to the area that the transmission's coming from. So I turned the radio compass on, and it points to his airplane. So I followed that compass to his airplane, where his airplane was, and up the river. And sure enough, when I hit I find the airport, and I'm able to land at that airport. But I had planned on ditching in that water, because it was not a very wide river, and I said, I'll ditch in the water, and we can swim ashore. But when I heard him, then I knew we were going to be safe. So I followed my compass, followed him, pointed to, got into the airport, landed, had 15 minutes gas left in my tanks, so I couldn't get out of there. So we had to sleep overnight in the airplane. They had to fly gas in barrels the next day for us to put in our plane so we could get out of there. So
Wow.
We couldn't get out of there.
Wow. Was that your closest call, do you think?
No.
No.
That wasn't the closest one.
No?
No, but that was kind of a funny one.
Yeah. Wow. You had to use a lot of ingenuity and a lot of...
Oh, yeah.
Well, you had to really, in the end, you had to rely on yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
You did. You didn't have any, radio facilities. Nobody to, and the crew. I remember the crew I had was a new crew from overseas, or just gotten overseas. The navigator and the co-pilot had just arrived from the States, and this was their first flight. It looked like it was going to be their last too.
Wow. Wow. You were all grateful to be on the ground.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I've had a lot of good breaks in my life.
Yeah. So you ended up flying for, I know you were discharged in March of 1946. So you were flying for a couple years?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Almost every day did you fly?
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What was the morale like in your unit?
Oh, it was good.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, it was very good. It was good with the pilots. It wasn't so good with some of the enlisted men. They were disgruntled. They were spending, the people in the South Pacific personnel spent a lot more time overseas, by and large, than those that were in the European theater.
Okay.
Whereas somebody in the European theater might spend a year overseas. Now these are just
Estimates,
numbers I
yeah,
read.
yeah, right.
The comparable one in the South Pacific might have been a year and a half.
Okay.
Part of that, I assume, was transportation, getting people back and forth. I don't know, but I do know that the people in the South Pacific did spend longer tours overseas than the people in the European theater.
Mhm.
And certainly, their living conditions were no comparison than the living conditions that people in Europe had, the soldiers in Europe had.
Mhm, mhm. And tell me then, to be specific, who had the worst living conditions?
Oh, the ones in the Pacific,
Okay,
they were staying in tents.
yeah,
They didn't have any tents pitched in Europe.
didn't they? Okay,
No,
Okay.
no.
okay,
They'd take over a building, they'd take over,
yeah,
a big hotel or whatever they wanted, they stayed over.
yeah. But there was nothing like that available in the
No,
Pacific.
they
No.
never, no, you look at those pictures in that book, you don't see any of those.
Yeah.
You won't see those in the Philippines,
Uh-huh.
not those
Uh-huh.
years.
Yeah. And how about you, Dr. Browne, when you went to the Pacific, that was it? You didn't get any time, you never came home?
Not when I went to the Pacific, no.
No.
No,
No.
no, and I was
So-
there for 15 or 18 months, I was there.
Uh-huh.
I think it was 8, I looked it up the other day in the papers, Army papers I have, and it was either 15 or 18 months. It was a long haul.
Wow. So you said during your free time you played cards.
Yeah,
Anything else to do? Did you have any USO shows or?
yeah, they did have the USO shows. Not many, but
Uh-huh.
they did have some. And they'd have some movies,
Movies?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
occasionally, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Not a lot, but
Uh-huh.
yeah.
And what about the food? How was that?
It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
They used to call it bully beef. I think it was mutton from Australia, sheep,
Okay.
but bully beef and hardtack. There was a song written by somebody that I don't remember the words now, but the song dealt with bully beef and hardtack.
Okay.
That's what they said they fed us all the time.
And that was appropriate. Okay. What else? So, where were you when on VJ Day?
I was on Okinawa.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you hear?
I think somebody from the headquarters came out shouting it.
Uh-huh.
We didn't have radios or anything, and I think somebody from the headquarters office came out, shouting when it happened.
Mm-hmm. Had you been expecting it? You knew the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and
Yeah.
Nagasaki,
Yeah,
so you were kind of expecting it.
yeah.
But still, how did that feel to know it was over?
Oh, it's like a elephant taking his foot off your chest. I'll
Uh-huh.
tell you, it was a real relief. There was a great celebration
Uh-huh.
on everybody's part. Great celebration.
Did they have any champagne, beer, or any official celebration?
No,
No.
no. Everybody had their own individual celebration.
Okay. Okay. That was nice. So how much longer were you there then after that?
Well, I was there, I left there, let's see, I was on, I left there, I probably was there a couple of months after the war ended, before I got, you had a hard time getting home. Now, I could have come home if I would have agreed to fly on a B-24. They had brand new B-24s over there. If you fly one of those back to the States and take 14 passengers, you could go home right away with one of them. But I wasn't gonna do that. I figured I used up all my luck flying in combat.
You were happy to wait.
So I thought I'll wait for the ship.
Okay.
I'll take the slow way home. So therefore, I had to wait a couple of months in order to get passage on a ship.
And a bunch of the other guys made that same decision?
Oh, yeah. Yes. You bet.
Okay. Okay. But the Army was still feeding you.
Oh yeah, yeah, and we were staying in we were staying in a former college, I guess, dormitories, and so they were nice rooms that we stayed in, and the food was good, and there wasn't much of anything to do. They did have a theater, community theater, and they did have USO shows, and Leo DeRocher was a baseball manager, a colorful person. I can remember going down to see him, and he put on a one-man show of some kind. I don't recall the specifics, but I do remember the fact that he was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could walk downtown and go in that theater and see something. And we still had planes there, and we'd fly. They would send over new recruits, and we'd check them out. We'd go out and shoot landings with them, and give them a little advanced training. They were just finished flight school, and
Mm-hmm.
so to give them a little extra training, we'd take them out and shoot landings. And then I flew over Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Did you?
Yeah, I didn't fly over it because I thought maybe radiation would go straight up. So
Right.
I flew around the periphery of it, because nobody knew what the radiation was or going to do, but I thought, well, it goes straight up, so
Sure.
I'll fly around here, so I could see the devastation
Yeah.
that it had caused
Uh-huh.
firsthand. So
Mhm.
just weeks after it had happened,
Wow. And what did you see?
complete destruction. Just
Complete.
everything was leveled. It was
Wow.
just rubble.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it hard to grasp that something could be that powerful?
It certainly was. You'd see bombed out areas. But certainly in any bombed out areas, you'd see certain structures still standing. There's nothing standing there.
Yeah.
From that bomb, there was nothing
Wow.
left. No tower standing anywhere. But in
Yeah.
bomb runs, you'd see a few things standing.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So finally the ship came and took you back to the West Coast?
Yeah, I came back to Oregon, I think. I think we went to Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Got on a train and came to Fort Sheridan. That's in Chicago, I think.
Okay.
And that's where we got our, I don't know what we did there.
Probably filled out your discharge papers?
Yeah, separation, yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't discharge if you were a pilot. They wouldn't discharge you.
Oh.
They had too much invested in pilots
Oh.
and in training them, so you couldn't get a discharge.
Oh.
They put you in the reserves, and when you, matter of fact, a couple of my, two of my friends, well, one of them, Bob Pugh,
I've heard of him.
he was chairman of Steelcase.
Yep.
He got called back in.
Did he?
He was a pilot during the war, and then when the Korean War broke out, I think, they wouldn't discharge pilots.
Right.
And when the Korean War, I think it was the Korean War broke out, he got called back. And he had to go back and fly again.
Wow.
And probably his skills were a little rusty, but they, didn't, it's like riding a bicycle, you never
Right.
forget completely. And because I know he went back, and Jim Stengline, a friend of mine in Ann Arbor, same thing with him. He had to go back in and fly. But I was in. They didn't call me because I was in a health profession school. I was in school at Michigan, but I was taking a pre-dental school. So they didn't take anyone who was in a pre-dent. And then when you got to be, I think it was 29. When you reached 29, they would allow you to resign from that.
Uh-huh.
From that.
Then it was really over.
Reserve. Yeah.
Yeah.
But some of them didn't. Some of them, like I suppose Jim Stengline, for instance, he was in the real estate business. I suppose he probably wouldn't care if he'd had to go back in and fly again.
Mm-hmm.
He probably wouldn't resign. I did. I resigned in a heartbeat when I had the opportunity. But,
Were you able to use the GI Bill for any of your education at
oh, yeah.
Michigan?
Oh yeah.
Well, that helped with the bills.
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm.
You bet it did. You bet it did, yeah. That was
That's great.
Great help.
That's great.
I saved more money when I was in the service than the service paid me. But I was lucky playing poker, and I would get so much ahead, and I would immediately send it home to my grandparents who put it in the bank, and so that I didn't. And then I would make sure that I didn't lose more than I made, and that's why I sent it back as soon as I got ahead at all, and
Good.
so when I got home, I had quite a bundle of money.
That's
so
great.
I didn't have to work. I worked when I started school in Ann Arbor. I worked from 2 in the morning until 8 in the morning in a factory, and King Sealy, down on William Street, and then went to school and tried to work all that in, and it was tough going. So I wanted to make sure I didn't have to do that again.
Good idea. That was great. When you look back on your whole military experience, how do you think it impacted your life?
Well, I think you certainly matured quite rapidly as a result of that, much more rapidly than you would have otherwise.
So much responsibility.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, maturity pretty much covers everything. I don't know of anything else.
Okay.
Beyond that.
That was the number one thing.
Sure.
Okay, we're just out of time on the tape. Anything else that we should mention that we didn't talk about?
Probably.
Probably a lot of things.
Yeah, we could talk for a long time probably,
But we hit the high points.
yeah, I think so.
Okay, it sounds like you transitioned to civilian life well.
I did. I've had several careers, and I enjoyed them all. I think I probably one I've enjoyed the most was probably practicing orthodontics,
Uh-huh.
and the one that was the most lucrative is the one I'm in now.
Okay. Okay. Good. I think we'll end on that note.